Chris, we're going to be live on Wisconsin Eye. So, talk to you later. Bye. I'm just checking. Hey.
Good morning. Glad I'm here. At least we have one live rep, right?
Don will be here too.
Good. Perfect. Do we have everybody on the line?
We haven't called in yet. So,
Is Ben here yet?
no.
Who's here? Mike?
Pardon?
Mike's here?
Yeah, Mike's here, you're there. Don's next to you.
Who's in? Is he?
That's Ross.
Okay, I see. You just got. Don't you have cards for the commissioners that are on the phone?
No. I don't.
Do we have cards for them?
We do have cards for them, yeah. I can put them out there, but I'm afraid that they won't see them. to another room.
Hi, this is Russ with the Election Commission. We're about to get started in just a little bit. We're sanitary monty group, you know?
Hey, that's great.
We have people on the line.
There are, so we're live. We don't know who's all there right now. No. Just told them that.
Hey, Bev, are you there?
I am, sir.
Julie?
Yes, I'm here.
Ann?
I'm here.
Steve? Steve, are you on?
Yeah, once I turn off mute, yeah.
All right. I didn't want to start. And then we have a representative DOJ on?
Yes, we do. We have a group at DOJ participating. This is David Meany. I'm the administrator for the Division of Legal Services. Also with me are Deputy Attorney General Andy Cook, Deputy Solicitor General Dan Leddington, and Assistant Attorney Generals Anthony Rusomano and Tom Bellavia.
All right.
Hello, this is Misha Taylor, Solicitor General. I'm on the call remotely.
And I'm Paul Connell, Senior Counsel. I'm on the phone remotely as well.
Are we expecting anybody else?
No, thank you all for joining us. You already did the roll call, Commissioner?
No. Well, I believe that we have everyone available per scheduled. With that, I'd request that this meeting formally be called to order. This is the special meeting of the Wisconsin Elections Commission as it relates to the petition for a recount. Before we start, I'd like the administrator's report of the appropriate meeting notice.
Yes, we posted this notice actually Saturday over the weekend in compliance with the open meetings law.
And now that we've officially started, I need an official roll call of the commissioners. Beverly Gill.
Here.
Julie Clancy.
Here.
Ann Jacobs.
Here.
Steve King.
Present.
And Don Millis is to my left. And I am Mark Thompson, the chair of the Wisconsin Elections Commission. Good morning, This commission was recently formed in June of 2015. It is 2016, excuse me, more recently than I had said. We are currently made up of 3 Democrats and 3 Republican appointees. We have to date been unanimous in our decisions. Our job is to make sure that they're fair and efficient and unrigged elections in the state of Wisconsin. And we believe that the last election, the presidential election, went through under the leadership of Michael Haas with very, very few bumps. And we were confident in our popular vote count. Per the law, the parties are allowed to request a recount, and that is why we are here today. As the chair, I wanted to move as quickly as possible to make sure that there would be no accusations or allegations that anyone on this commission was trying to do something to stop the vote from being certified, in violation of the federal safe harbor provisions. And for that reason, that's why I'm assuming most of you are out in the audience here today. And with that, we will go to the item on the agenda, which is specifically the presidential election recount timeline and procedural issues. And who's handling that, Mike?
Ross Heim will handle that. I'll just say, just as an introductory note, so that the public knows, when the commission receives a recount petition, as long as the petition is valid and only needs to state a belief that there was a mistake in the vote total, and as long as the required recount fee is paid, if any is required, the commission does not have any discretion or option to deny the petition, and the commission must issue a recount order. But there are some procedural issues that the staff is recommending for the procedures for the recount statewide for the county canvass boards, and the chair and the staff thought it would be best for the commission to have an opportunity to weigh in on some of those procedures. So most importantly, to start with, the staff has proposed a timeline for the statewide recount, and our election supervisor, Ross Heim, is going to walk through that for us.
Thanks, Mike. So, should I move the mic over? Thanks. So in your materials today, we have a general timeline for which we are proposing the statewide recount for the office of the President of the United States to take place. And it is a abbreviated time frame due to the safe harbor provision of federal law, which requires any election dispute to be settled within 35 days of the election. So essentially, a statewide recount would need to be completed in less than 2 weeks, and given staff's experience with the 2011 Supreme Court recount, it is going to be a very tight and aggressive time frame, and it is going to require election officials throughout the state to work extended hours during the week and work over the weekend as well. On Friday, we received a petition from both the Jill Stein campaign and the Rocky De La Fuente campaign. We communicated to our county clerks that we received this petition with a tentative time frame so preparations could commence as soon as possible. Today, we are asking by noon to have all Wisconsin county clerks to submit an estimate of what they believe their costs will be should a statewide recount be required. We will accumulate those estimates from each of the 72 county clerks, and then we will provide an estimate to both campaigns by close of business today. On Tuesday, November 29th, we are requesting that either the Stein or De La Fuente campaign submits full payment to the Wisconsin Elections Commission. Once we have received payment, we will then issue a recount order to all presidential candidates. On Wednesday, November 30th, staff would hold a teleconference at the Capitol for all 72 county clerks to participate to go over the recount rules and procedures. The teleconference is tentatively scheduled for 10 a.m. and will be held via webinar. On Thursday, December 1st, we are proposing that all recounts in the state of Wisconsin begins. In Wisconsin, recounts are conducted for state and federal offices at the county office, and that is done by the County Board of Canvassers. And so each of the 72 county canvassers, we would request to have them start by December 1st and to work continuously until completion on Tuesday, December 13th. We are proposing the recount to be completed by noon, and we would then prepare the official recount certification and have that signed by one of the commissioners at 3 p.m. We anticipate that there will be many counties that will complete earlier than that time frame, especially our smaller municipalities. But I know, in speaking with a few county clerks, that it is going to be very challenging for many of our county clerks and their canvass members to complete this statewide recount in less than 2 weeks. At the bottom of page 2, you'll see a recommended motion requesting that the Commission approve the above timeline for the likely statewide recount.
Thank you. Now, before we get into the specifics of the motion, I'll open up the meeting for any questions or comments from any of my fellow commissioners.
Commissioner Thompson, this is Ann Jacobs. I do have a question for Mr. Hine. What needs to be accomplished by the Commission in the 3 hours allotted on December 13th? I'm concerned that we may not be allowing ourselves enough time to accomplish any tasks if anything goes wrong. It seems like a rather razor-thin margin of error there, and perhaps you could tell us what it is that we would need to accomplish, or obviously you all as staff, during that period of time, and why such a tight time frame is the recommendation.
Sure, Commissioner Jacobs, the recount certification is issued directly through our Canvas application, and the Canvas application will allow each of the county Canvas, or I should say county clerks, submit their recount totals, and whether that is changed from the initial results that were inputted likely last week. So that should be a fairly straightforward process where we can just easily print that certification. We can get the majority of the documents ready in advance, and that's why we only think it's going to be a 3-hour time frame, because it's going to be a fairly straightforward process.
I would also add, Diane Lowe, our lead election specialist, is here, and she had prepared to certify the official Canvas results tomorrow, which we will do for all contests except for those that are under recount. Some of those documents merely need to be redated for signature, assuming that the result does not change. We also would expect, as Ross said, that many counties will finish before the 12th, and we will be able to look at those results as we go along, and we will not be waiting for 70 counties to finish on the last day. Our job here is, it's a pretty abbreviated task. We need to print out the report, make sure that we understand if there are any significant differences, that we can consult with the county clerk. But we can do that also as we go along, and we would expect many counties in the state, 72 counties, that will be able to finish within a week or shortly after that.
I would just add, Mike, that, and this is Ross Hine again, we did want to give county canvassers as much time as possible. And so it might not seem like that additional 4 or 5 hours, on Tuesday the 13th would really make a difference, but we wanted to give the maximum time frame because it is such a consolidated, abbreviated time frame.
One task, just to dig into the details a little bit more, one task that the county clerk has to do after the recount is finished, all the ballots are counted. If they do not have election management software that electronically inputs the data into our system, they need to hand enter that. And in some cases, they will need to hand enter at least the last results that they are finishing on the last day or so. And some clerks, their practice is to have the canvass board be dismissed on the day that they finish and to come back on the next morning merely to sign the certification. That may be the case in some counties, that they may want that extra time to make sure their documents are in order for signature the following morning.
Mr. Mellis?
Hey, Mark.
Okay, go ahead.
Mark.
Go ahead, Mr. King.
This is Steve. Yeah. Question for Mike. It might be helpful for folks to understand what rights the other presidential candidates that were on our ballot have vis-a-vis the county recounts.
Sure, there's been a lot of questions about that, especially over the weekend. Every candidate, first of all, has the right, every candidate who is on the ballot as a presidential candidate has the right to request a recount. Right now we have 2 recount petitions pending, but also every candidate has a right to have representation at every recount canvass board at every county in the state to review ballots, potentially to raise objections or challenges either to ballots or procedures that are being used, and to preserve those objections for potential court review. And so with that involved, we have 7 presidential candidates. I wouldn't expect that all of them will have representatives, but certainly some of them will. And that process and those rights do tend to take some extra time in the recount process.
Thanks.
Mark, this is Julie Glancy. I have a question.
Go ahead.
Is the state going to be monitoring the counties in some way to find out daily kind of where they are in the process, so that if there is a county that's falling behind, you're going to know it sooner rather than the last day?
Sure, Commissioner Glancy, this is Ross Hine. So I believe you participated in the 2011 Supreme Court recount. In that recount, on a daily basis, we asked county clerks to provide us a daily summary of the reporting units that were completed. And we would then, the next day, accumulate that for each of the 72 counties and post that on our website. We are proposing a similar process just to keep the public and any candidate representatives aware of the progress being taken place. So we will know pretty much within 24 hours where each of the 72 county clerks and their canvass board members are in the recount process.
Okay, thank you.
Go ahead, Don.
This is Ann Jacobs. Following up on that, what happens if noon comes on that day and we haven't heard from one of our 1,800 counting units?
Well, there's 1,854 municipal clerks and 72 county clerks, so it's a little more than 1,800.
Well, I was spitballing it, but either way.
I was trying to be more precise.
Do you want me to cover that?
Go ahead.
So just generally speaking, there is a federal law we have discussed. It's known as the Safe Harbor date. Under that federal law, any challenge to a state's presidential votes needs to be resolved by the 35th day after Election Day. If that is not accomplished, the result is not that the state's electoral votes are forfeited. We want to make that clear. The result is that Congress, first of all, the Electoral College representatives for Wisconsin are scheduled to meet on December 19th at noon, as are the electoral slates for every other state. If a recount contest is not completed by the 13th, federal law provides that Congress is not required to honor the slate of electors chosen to represent that state. In this case, the Republican Party representatives representing the Donald Trump campaign. The statute, as far as I can tell, does not say that Congress is required to reject the slate, just that Congress is not required to honor it. I take that to mean it can still honor that slate of electors, although we have not done extensive research on that statute. Now, if Congress does not honor the slate of electors, then the decision goes to Congress. Both houses of Congress decide which slate of electors represents the state's electoral votes. In the case of a split Congress, if both houses of Congress do not agree, then the decision ultimately goes back to the governor of the state. So while there is a federal deadline, and while we are requiring county boards to do everything they can to meet that federal deadline, we do want to make it clear that there may not be, in the end, a practical effect as to where the electoral votes for the state of Wisconsin go, assuming the result does not change. It's a procedural statute. It is significant when you have a dispute really about if the election is so close that there is a real dispute about which slate of electors should be recognized when Congress ultimately accepts the electoral votes of each state.
Mr. Chair, a couple things. Just to clarify, as I understand it, the recounts are done at the county level. The local municipal clerks, the 1,800 and how many?
54.
54. Don't have an official role, although they may be hired or volunteer to help count. But then the other question is, I have two questions really. From 8 a.m. on December 1st to 8 p.m. on December 12th is 300 hours. Round the clock, 24 hours a day. Not expecting that. If we wanted the recounts in by 8 p.m. on December 12th, which is a little bit shorter, we'd be shorting them 16 hours. 16. So instead of having 316 hours, they'd have 300 hours. Would there be something so wrong about that? I understand the desire to give them as much time as possible, but Commissioner Jacobs makes a good point. And then my other question is, has there been any thought to giving them, suggesting milestones so that, for example, we've got a timetable and the recount starts on December 1st. Any thoughts to saying that, by, and I haven't done the math, but by December 5th or 6th, you should have 30% of the votes tabulated or calculated or reviewed, et cetera. Just because my concern is that myself being chief among procrastinators, there's this desire, well, we'll get to it, and then suddenly with 48 hours to go, you've got half the county, and that'd be my concern.
No, it's a good point. I agree, Commissioner Millis, and I would invite my colleagues to chime in, but I think that we would certainly suggest that they keep an eye on what their progress is. I think we can't go strictly by a daily deadline, because what we tend to see is that as they get into the recount and the process becomes more familiar, it goes more quickly. And that the progress is slow maybe the first day or two, but as you cycle people into their jobs and their roles, that things are expedited. But I think it's an excellent point that we want to be encouraging them to reach some rough benchmarks throughout the process. I would note in reviewing some of the estimates that county clerks have been submitting, Brown County, for instance, estimates that if a hand count is required, they would need upwards of 60 or more people. And so the cost itself, while it would be reimbursed, may not be the biggest challenge. It may be finding enough individuals to schedule them to be working during December when they did not plan to on evenings and weekends.
Hi, this is Julie again. I know from my experience in recounts that the first few days you're dealing with the observers and the representatives for the candidates who aren't familiar with the process, and they have a lot of questions, and that kind of delays it in the beginning, in addition to the fact that your workers aren't as familiar with what they're doing. So I agree, trying to set a deadline that evens it out across that time period isn't really realistic.
I think, though, that's just in terms of a formal timeline, I think Commissioner Millis's point is well taken, that we should clearly have internal mechanisms as opposed to maybe an official timeline to follow up. And I'm certain that my fellow commissioners, and certainly I, will be very concerned about the timeline. I mean, part of this process was we wanted to make sure that we were effective and timely in getting this done per the law. And in that regard, I want to just address a couple of things for the public, because many people are asking. One was the issue about the petition and the filing and the estimate and the cost structure. And this whole notion, because the statutes for the folks in the audience and the press are not crystal clear. They could have been clearly drafted in a clearer way. I mean, for example, one key issue was that upon receipt of the petition, which was received Friday at about 3 p.m.
Correct.
So that was the Friday after Thanksgiving at 3 p.m. where this body was first legally put on notice of official acts to take. So you got to assume a lot of people were deer hunting, a lot of people were spending family time with Thanksgiving, and you get the notice, and the first thing we had to decide was, when do the clerks provide their estimates of the cost? The statute says promptly. It doesn't define promptly. Other parts of the statute, I do some insurance law, promptly is defined as 10 days. Obviously, as chair, we couldn't wait 10 days to get estimates, because then Mr. Millis would be sitting here saying, why are you trying to stop this process? And we have done everything we could to expedite this together so this gets done. And so if you could maybe just address two things. How we're doing this estimate, what are people being provided today at noon in terms of the actual costs? And in that regard, touch on the issue of the petition, because the petition, Jill Stein's petition, specifically asked for a hand count, and why it's not within our jurisdiction to order that, and the procedure, and what we're going to make available to all the campaigns in the event they decide to go seek a court order for a hand count. So you want to do that, or you want me to address it? I
can touch on it quickly. I know some commissioners have a tight deadline, and that we want to get the timeline approved. But regarding the estimate, on Wednesday, when we were notified that a petition was likely to be filed on Friday, we did send an email immediately to county clerks that afternoon, alerting them that they would need to construct an estimate for their costs for the recount. Some of those clerks may have been out of the office already for the holiday by the time that email was sent out. Friday, when we received the petition late in the day, we sent out another email to clerks emphasizing the noon today deadline for them to construct estimates. It is up to each county canvass board whether or not the recount is conducted by hand or by voting, by tabulating equipment under state law. The only way around that is if the candidate seeks a court order that is granted to require a hand count statewide. The burden of proof seems to be fairly high in the statutes, but that would be up to the candidate to initiate that action. Some clerks are submitting to us alternate estimates depending on the method of tabulation. That decision, the method of tabulation, is ultimately up to the county canvass board when they first meet, but we are suggesting to clerks that they provide us an estimate for what they will recommend, the method that they will recommend to the canvass board. We will provide an estimate to the petitioning candidates. The actual cost will be submitted after the recount is completed. If the estimate was too low, the candidates will be on the hook for the balance. If the estimate was too high, then there will be a refund issued to the candidate or candidates who submit the recount fee.
So, I mean, just to summarize, and just to make the point, absent a complete payment of the cost tomorrow, there will not be an order for a recount. Assuming that the Stein campaign, by my reading of the Twitter feeds, they have raised the money. They have to pay tomorrow before we proceed.
Correct.
Any other questions?
Mark,
yeah, go ahead, Mr. King.
Steve, back to the respective burden of bodies required to do the counting, especially if it's hand. If we have 854 local clerks, is there any way to conscript them? I mean, the simple math says that's about 26 per county. Is there a way to conscript them to aid in especially some of the larger counties?
Well, I'm sure the county clerks are already in the process of recruiting the municipal clerks to help out, and also to bring their election inspectors who are more familiar with their poll lists and their materials for their reporting units. There is no requirement in the statutes that the municipal clerks must participate in the county canvass. The county clerk can require them to provide information, but as far as being on site and participating, as a tabulator, I believe it's not required under the statutes, but I'm sure that many of our municipal clerks will be cooperating with the county clerks and helping them out themselves, and also providing their, or asking their poll workers to participate.
Good.
Mike, excuse me, at 2011, I was a clerk, and we did bring our election inspectors into the county, and they were more than willing to help.
This is Ross. Just one other comment along those same lines. I think because of the tight time frame, county boards are really going to need to set up multiple groups of what we call tabulators as part of the recount. That could be municipal clerks, that could be poll workers, any type of election official, but they're really going to need to have multiple, essentially tabulating groups set up, going through multiple reporting units just to ensure that they complete that timeline. And just one other point, all ballots are reviewed prior to tabulation, whether it's being counted by hand or by voting equipment. Election officials must review each ballot before that tabulation is conducted.
You know, Steve, you know, one thing that I think is really important in this is, you know, part of the beauty of our system and why I think it's been, you know, the Wisconsin system, and why any allegations that it wasn't fair or that there were illegal votes counted, you know, it really goes to the heart that we have our fellow citizens, 1,854 municipal clerks, 72 county clerks, and all the volunteers, you know, they counted. It's very, very decentralized. And to say that we didn't count them correctly the first time, you know, that it somehow there were illegal votes being counted was really inappropriate. You know, the last time there was a recount for the Supreme Court, I think there was 1.5 million votes, and roughly then on a recount there was like 500 votes changed, 300 votes changed. One thing that we're going to find out about our system is that, you know, we have, I think that the official, or it wasn't the official, it would have been the official certification. We have a difference between the Clinton and the president-elect of 22,177 votes. You know, I don't think that we'll find, or we will find in this, that our fellow citizens counted these votes accurately, and it will be very interesting to see how many over 300, if that were inappropriate. So if nothing else, this is going to give us a very good audit. It's going to reassure Wisconsin voters that we have a fair system, that we're not counting illegal votes, we're not counting dead people's votes, and it's really, really important to know that in Wisconsin, elections are fair and accurate and conducted by hardworking people, my fellow citizens.
Disagree with anything you've said, Mark. Does anybody recall how long it took to count those little over 1 million votes in that Supreme Court recount?
It was roughly a month or a little more, Ross, is that right? A month's time. We did have a little bit of an anomaly in Waukesha County, which took an extremely long period of time. They were being very meticulous, which was understandable given the controversy surrounding that election in that county in particular. We did intervene at some point in that recount and provided some suggestions to Waukesha County about how they could expedite the recount, and I think if we saw particular counties that were struggling during this process, we would take the same approach.
And I think, Steve, we also have encouraged the the county clerks to have actual costs to make sure that they have the funds available to recruit the necessary people in a very timely fashion.
But that anomaly aside, it took a month to count a little over 1 million votes.
Right, but they weren't under the same kind of pressure that we are. I think the federal statute's very clear that we have to be done.
Right, a week before the electoral college.
Right. I mean, we all know, I think we all agree, all 6 of us agree that this needs to be done in a timely fashion. And I know that some folks have to have had other things on their schedule this morning. But before we take go to the specific motion, I would ask that we modify the motion consistent with Mr. Millis and Ms. Jacobs' concerns about being done on the 13th. How about if we adopt that it would be the recount done on the 8 p.m. on the 12th? That will give then the commission time to, that gives us more time in the event we have some issues going on.
I agree. I'll move the recommended motions as amended.
I'll second that motion.
At the risk of having Diane stare at me and say, "You can blame it on me, okay?"
So everybody clear? We're adopting the proposed schedule by the staff with that one change. Can you live with that, Mr. Haas?
The question is, will the county clerks and canvas boards be able to live with it? We will certainly communicate that that is the commission's directive.
Right.
Right.
That's right.
Well, I think we have to say to everybody involved that it's really up to us to make it happen and, be an example.
Absolutely.
But that will take...
I still think Don's motion or recommendation that we have some targets it doesn't have to be part of the motion, but it certainly should be communicated by the staff to the respective counties that, by a certain time we'd like to have half of the votes counted or something to that effect.
Right. Steve, I'm sitting right next to Mike. He's wrote it down. He has a big star right by it. So
Okay, great.
he'll be on it. I mean, the other thing, too, is remember, at any point in time between now and during this count, if anybody wants a full commission meeting, all they have to do is contact me. We'll have it again if we need to have a meeting. I mean, everybody has been, very cooperative, and thank you all for being available Monday morning on very, very short notice. With that, all in favor of the motion?
Aye.
Aye. Aye.
Aye.
Aye. I think we had all six.
Just ask for names, just in case.
Any opposed? So there you go. We have our timeline.
Okay.
Now we have DOJ on the line. I trust that in the event there is court action taken, you'll fully represent our views with the judge and make sure that this follows through, consistent with it.
Yes, we are prepared to do that.
Are there any concerns on your end with our timeline before we end up with this meeting?
We don't have any concerns with the timeline or the discussion concerning the timeline.
Well, we thank you much. I know that we put it out there notice early over the weekend, and we've been working with your staff last week, anticipating that maybe there would be, and we appreciate your involvement, and thank you.
Welcome.
Do you want to discuss these issues at all?
The
The memo,
what we did, what when,
we have a couple of recommended motions specifically about the recount fee.
didn't we touch on that?
We did touch on it. I don't know if you want to have the commission.
All right, let's go to the recommended motion on
Page 3.
page 3.
This is the memo that I sent to the commission late last night, so I apologize for it, but most of it contained some information, at least, that you had received in general previously. The memo related to the recount estimate and fee, as well as the option for a hand count versus machine count, and also our voting equipment audit. There's two recommended motions, one on the bottom of page 3 and one on page 4.
Well, let's deal with the issue on the bottom of page 3. What is your recommended motion? We'll have some discussion on it.
The recommended motion is for the commission to approve the staff's recommendations, directing staff to provide the estimated recount fee today, including any valid state costs, to the petitioning candidates. Again, today, for payment due at the close of business tomorrow, November 29th. Further, that staff will be directed to assess the full estimated recount fee to both candidates unless the candidates each submit payment for 1/2 of the total estimated cost by the close of business today. Or I'm sorry, the close of business tomorrow.
Mr. Chair, I had a little sidebar with Nate over here. I was going to suggest maybe a few friendly amendments to the motion. Close of business, why don't we say 4:30 Central Time? Let's make it clear that's close of business. And then I think the standard is, it's not necessary that each campaign pay half, but that between the two campaigns, the entire fee is paid. Is that right?
Well, there's a little bit more detail in the text of the memo. Our recommended, or our staff approach at this point, there's a few ways to do this. We have to receive, there's no question we have to receive the full payment. I think our staff consensus is that if Mr. De La Fuente wants to be a petitioner, that that campaign needs to bear an equal burden of the recount fee. That is at least our recommendation.
Okay, well then, I guess I saw that and I wasn't sure if that was mandate, or is that your interpretation of the statutes?
It is, and there are, I think, reasonable arguments for treating it as you suggested, Commissioner. But it seems to the staff that there needs to be an obligation, an equal obligation on each candidate who files a recount petition.
So the way the motion is written, as recommended, it would be that if the total amount is paid, and if the recount can go forward, if Mr. De La Fuentes wants to be considered a petitioner, he would have to pay at least half.
Correct. I think we would initially give them, each campaign, the full bill. If it's $1 million, we tell them this is what has to be paid, and they pay it. If it turns out that they both simultaneously pay us $1 million, we would refund 1/2 of that to each of them.
I think it has to be unequivocally clear, though, unless the full actual costs are paid by the close of business on Tuesday. Are we saying 4:30?
4:30 Central Time.
For both November 28th and November 29th, correct? We have close of business twice.
Right.
Oh, it should be payments is on Tuesday, the 29th, right?
Right.
So it's 4:30 tomorrow.
Right.
Right.
Okay.
Right, that's right.
All right, we have a motion. Do we have a second?
Do we have a motion? Did somebody make it?
I'll move the recommended motion with the substituting 4:30 p.m. For close of business on Tuesday, November 29th.
Second?
Second, this is Ann.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Aye.
Aye.
Aye. All, any opposed? Thank you.
Can you ask if Beverly's still on the phone? I'm not sure if she participated.
Yeah. Beverly, are you still there?
I still am for a few more minutes,
Okay.
Yeah, just let us know when you have to run, okay?
by quarter after.
All right, well, I think we're going to get there. You have another recommended motion?
Right, on page 4, this has to do with the method of recount. As we summarized earlier, the staff position is to honor the statute which allows each county canvass board to determine the method of recount unless there is a court order. The Stein recount petition has requested that we order a hand recount, and so we are recommending that the commission direct staff to decline that request to tally all ballots by hand and to permit each county to determine whether ballots will be counted by hand or using tabulating equipment consistent with existing state law.
I think this
Move that motion.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, I think this is consistent with our prior discussion and implicit in our prior discussion. So this is just making the point very clear. All in favor?
Aye. Aye.
Aye. Anybody opposed?
Sorry, who seconded that?
I did.
Okay.
Mr. Miller.
Well, last one would be the audit. I don't know if you want to discuss that.
There's also an issue on the audit. For folks in the audience, Wisconsin is a state that does audits of elections, and so we had a system in place prior to the elections that certain certain counties would be
Municipalities.
and municipalities would be audited. Some of those audits have been completed. We put a hold on the rest of the audits in light of the recount, because if this is paid, the amount is paid for the petition order goes out, we will have a full recount, and I think from my point of view, I don't think we need to do an audit, and it may be good to tell the clerks now that we know you're going to work really, really hard now, and if it's done, we're not going to bother you with an audit later. So, I'd entertain a motion to that effect, that we modify the current audit schedule in the event the fees are paid for the petition and the actual recount takes place.
I'll make that motion. This is Julie.
Thank you, Julie. Do I have a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Any other business?
I guess the only question would be if the commission thinks it's necessary to.
Yeah.
Okay.
For the open, I think now then is, I would like to go into closed session for those folks that would, do I need a motion on that?
To go into closed session, yes.
I'd like a motion to go into closed session to address a couple other matters. For those folks that can stay around or stay on the line.
So moved.
All right, Mark, I do have to leave.
I got you. Can you just vote
All right.
to allow us, and then we'll fill you in later?
I will.
Thank
I move that
you.
we move into closed session to deal with the litigation update.
Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed?
So I think just for logistics, what may be easier, since we have a room full of cameras here, is maybe if we adjourn to our large conference room for the commission closed session. I could suggest that.
And then we'll come back in and we'll take questions for the press.
Right. And so, commissioners, if you give us a couple minutes and then dial into the same number, we will set up in the large conference room. And I guess that also applies to DOJ. If you want to participate or listen in to that closed session, we will be using the same conference line.
And frankly, I would really appreciate if you would call in on that.
We will, and I assume you're taking steps that it would be a non-public call-in.
Yes.
Correct.
Very good. We'll call in. What would be the time frame?
I think if you give us 5 minutes.
Okay.
It'll be very short. Thanks. So we're going to go into closed session now. That ends the public session. And for the press, we'll be back in hopefully 15 minutes to a half an hour, and we can take any other questions that you may have at that point in time.
No, you know how they are. They'll send everybody now and then back off. What closet did they pull Stephanie Gosk out of, though? I haven't seen her in a million years.
Hopefully this will not be long, and we'll be back if people have questions remaining.
Ongoing sort of issue. So Tibbs will do anything else. I did that on 2 spots, actually. I'll still probably do more on the shooter.
Yeah. I saw a preliminary or tentative request for the 15 and 2 concerns. Okay. But we haven't got the plans yet, and I don't know when they'll
How do you see tentative requests?
I can go into the request log.
Oh, okay. I bet we could put all day. Yeah, they're all politics all the time. It's the brand. Exactly.
And I haven't seen, they haven't put in a working process yet.
They work a little late on the It's close to here, isn't it?
Yeah.
Should we go?
You do that. There's also a couple other options that look pretty good. There's also sushi.
There we go.
For you officially?
Well, I'm gluten light right
Oh.
now. I started eating gluten
Looks like
light.
it's I'm so sorry.
I'm getting an endoscopy in January,
Oh.
and they have to do a biopsy. But I started eating, they're supposed to be gluten in my system, or it won't be inflamed and they won't be able to tell me. So, like I make that all good. I'm sure there's chicken nuggets that gluten in it.
So,
Even like soy sauce. I really didn't have to put it. It's like I took a gluten free soy sauce.
it's in a Diet Coke. Like,
No, it's not. It's not.
but like,
I try.
you had a shot.
It's just
Water.
eating a lot of, you can't have like processed foods. It's all the fresh food, which will be good. I mean, it'll be fun. Skittles are gluten free.
Okay, well, now we're talking.
It's half my
Now it's beautiful.
diet right there. Like rice is gluten free. So it's just like restaurants that can like wedding sauces. That's what usually eat people up.
Yeah.
Like I went to dinner with Gio when he was in Chicago, and he's eating gluten free now. He doesn't have celiac, but he's just eating gluten free. So like it's basically salad, dressing on the side, like scallops or chicken or something on the salad. But right, yeah, but it's kind of clean.
Probably improve your, or reduce the risk of cancer and stuff.
One thing I need to check is like going overseas. Like if I would go off the gluten-free diet for a week when I'm on vacation or something, is that okay? Or does that like create, like how long does it take, I guess, my body to return to normal once I stop eating gluten?
I guess it's just a matter of figuring it out.
Because if I'm in like Puerto Vallarta, I don't speak the language, like how am I going to ask them if it's gluten-free? And they don't even have that ability down there, you know?
Oh. So I started watching Recount.
Okay.
Yeah, I got through the second episode like once
Whatever
he
you
died.
want.
And I mean, it's really good.
I thought the first episode was a little slow,
Yeah.
but once it does, then it really starts to get good.
It's really touching the emotions that you don't really think about.
It's beautifully shot.
And like the opening montage with the clown being there, it's really cool. And I also finished Search Party, which is like totally greenlit and really funny.
Search Party?
Yeah. It's on now. It's a
On Netflix?
TV show. No, but it's really humorous.
I haven't even heard that.
It's good. It's like a break. You can watch it. And then the Gilmore Girls. I don't know how I got time.
Oh yeah, that reboot started, huh?
Yeah.
I never saw the original.
I wonder why they like some girl.
She's neurotic.
How did for Wednesday.
It
Oh
was
no.
fine, but I couldn't try to tell her, like, so the day before we were out there, Tuesday, we were working from the bureau, just like set up all these interviews and all this stuff, and I'm like, she got a little offended because I'm like, you realize the way these are your live shots go, we're gonna be like part of whips, and it's gonna be like 60 seconds, like, and this is not looking for interviews fed back. It's just not usually what we want. If anything, in a live interview, quick. She's like, oh, I just think it's, should we set these things up? It's like, all right, do whatever you want. So she had like
The dogs.
the dogs was fine because that was a live interview for 1 minute. But then she was trying to set up all sorts of exports about travel. I was like, no, MS does not want that. Like if anything, they're annoyed when you feed that back to them and have them cut it. Like they'll do it, but they're annoyed. It's not what she does. It's the intensity at which she does it. Like I'm happy with my dogs. I don't care, but she just goes chill. When we had dogs, then she shot a bunch of stuff separately empty for Stella's package. But I like to sit myself I don't need to sit with Stella has one, so she's but
And the funny thing is the Elliot stuff is just like the whole good.
the thing I want to know is, God, it's like that. So we went all day, right? Like 8 a.m. to 6 p.m. Again. Cottage choice. Wasn't like ready till noon. Well, I guess it's 9 a.m. West Coast, so we just don't make them get there too early. But he only like 4 nights, his stay was like 4 hours. Because I was Snapchatting with them and I was like, what's up with that? Like, I've been out here since 9 Eastern.
I mean, did he have any obligations after? Like cover the bureau?
No, the just says, like, this is when you'll go ahead and take it. This is when we'll be ready.
Huh.
Whereas Nadine was just like, yeah, whatever you want. It was just weird that it was like, to do all there.
To me, it seems like you're not allowed to
No, that's what I thought. But obviously, bureau chiefs can step in. Probably might say, well, I'm checking more stuff until 9 and we're not paying ready for overtime or something.
So I can't confirm that the suspect is dead. No, for sure. I don't know if you saw that about Joe Steiner there, but I didn't. The judge.
But she has to.
Right, but she hasn't.
Oh, right.
Yeah. And I thought it was interesting that they're recommending no handicap. Did they make that recommendation to the judge? No.
No, that's just what tell the counties.
Mm-hmm.
And the judge recommended order them
Yeah.
the truth.
What?
Yeah, she hear the hotel room.
It was a train. No, I didn't really hear what. When, were you up high?
Yeah, 14. And right on the lake.
Yeah. Nice that the lake is right there. I've only been to Madison once before, and it was for like a quick in and out interview.
It's pretty.
Yeah.
Do you have room?
Yes, I have room. Still like a 3.5 hour drive that I did there and back on the same day. Yeah, but it was totally worth it.
Cheering on.
Yes. My aunt got home. Yeah, my dad's from Wisconsin, so all of his family still lives up in that Colfax, Boomer, Eau Claire area. Yeah, so it kind of worked out nice because I only had Thursday. So I only had one day.
Go there and
It was great though. It was really fun, and then I hosted a bunch of reporters on Saturday at my house. And made a turkey. Yeah. I guess so.
Ohio State is a summit.
I was an inventor though, and never grew a turkey.
Did it come out okay?
It did. It was excellent.
3 kids, right? I know 4. My aunt.
Oh, when you recorded me, it was just.
No, see the bottom of it. That was just half of it. Additional teams going.
Oh, that's ridiculous.
And it's really important. But you can still see it.
All those South region people. That market down there. Look at that line at Tokyo. Pretty busy. She was in the bus carriage.
24 years old.
Is she?
I don't know. She seems young. And therefore, has the energy. Oh, she's 32. Oh. Well, at least this is here now.
We'll go home tonight. Is that everything?
Yeah, I effectively put myself in at 5:25. It's even good before. Yeah, 40 is 5 o'clock.
So, right, well, and just to see, I took it down.
I met you briefly when I was an intern at Care last year. It was like 2 weeks before you left. I work at the NBC now.
Cool. Good for you. That's quite a quick rise, huh?
Yes, well, it's been crazy. This time last year I was an intern at Care. Now it's
You
like,
just started.
no, I did. Yeah, I graduated in December.
Oh, that's amazing.
Well, especially with this election has been really crazy.
Yeah. One days matters. It's like, do you need your wife? Like, it's your voice. It's pretty much in the middle of nowhere.
In a different way, maybe. Well, how's it going? I watch you obviously in between our newscasts. That's been going.
Yeah, no, it's been going really well.
Because you've been here for you've been doing this for about a year. Almost exactly.
Yeah, a
Right?
little over a year. It's good. It's like travel. It's fun. It's something different.
When I
spoke to you last night. I can't remember. You told me. Yeah, they told me to just put everything in a storage unit and then just like.
I didn't know where I was going.
Yeah.
I was in Chicago, but they started me in LA for 3 months.
And I was like, oh my gosh, like this poor guy, but like not really. Actually, that sounds awesome.
Well, even now I feel like everything pretend you're there.
Right? Yeah. Exactly.
Yeah. What's that?
Except when you see your friend.
I know. How's he doing? I haven't seen him.
Good. Andy.
Like, yeah, I haven't seen him in a while. Is he on vacation?
Yeah. I was with Gio last week.
Yeah, it was Gio.
It was fun.
Did you see Raina had her baby?
Yes. So I saw
Like
her
this.
last month. I went to the baby shower.
Oh,
Because they
you
were rolling
did.
together.
Oh, that's awesome.
At her house.
Rena and Jana, like, I love what they're doing over there.
Yeah.
But they're doing some really cool stuff.
Yeah, it's cool. It's nice that they're given basically permission to break all the rules and not buy a template.
And it's like working. Like, I don't know, I think their stuff is really interesting because it's so different.
Yeah, and they're putting, which I think is good, a lot of college or photography resources into it. It just looks really slick.
Yeah, it doesn't look like that very standard, like, MPPA kind of flow. It's totally different.
Yeah.
I'm obsessed. I'm still like in contact with Jane. I'm like just trying to get over there.
Would you want to go?
That's like my one place.
Because your family's from Minnesota.
Yeah, I'm from the city. And I graduated from U of M, and you know my boyfriend was there, all that. So.
How long did you been here?
1 year. So I think he will after this round. And then I don't know what Wood told me because you know Wood did like 2 years up in the loop and then went down to care, but she's not there anymore. So I'm like looking at that spot, like, and she was like, I wouldn't recommend it because it was really crazy going from such a small market to such a big market. But I'm like, Stein and Shore.
When she did that, it came to all the reporters were 55 years old.
Right.
She's this new 22-year-old.
Yeah.
It's not like
I would hope so, and I think that a person my age would bring some things to it that they're trying to do, you know, like a different outlook.
Well, knowing the area gives you such a leg up.
Yeah.
Because that's, as you know, compared to issues, that's half of the learning. It's just figuring out pronounce everything,
Right.
where you are.
What's important, you know, like, oh, people here don't really care about that. You're okay, that's nice.
Right.
I know, and they love care less.
Exactly. Yeah, because when I moved here, I used to beg all the
Hour
time.
ahead.
If you're
Very
tired
different.
anywhere,
Yeah.
we're growing up and only go out in live tracks, like you never go out and waste the news.
Let's work here. I show up and I'm like, oh, like, two people. That doesn't really affect anybody.
Yeah, right.
It's just a very different life.
Things going on at the lake.
Right.
Okay.
Right. Let's talk about the whole show life really goes up.
Yeah, I love that. I'm like, please. Let's go back.
It's a good story.
It is.
And it's like you're actually changing all this stuff.
And they're doing, I don't know, I just think that they're doing really cool stuff over there too, to kind of like go forward and say like this.
Here's talking to Gina about, oh, she can be signing something when you're timing. Should I call her?
She's so proud. I went to a workshop in Minneapolis hosted by Boyd and she told me she's from that area. I think I left. She said that she had family here.
Okay.
So I think she might have been here for the holiday, or she was live streaming it.
A lot of people are up in Wisconsin.
Yeah. Yeah. It's a good place to be. I think it's possible to be. Like I said, now you go from benchmark dating to
Absolutely. I wouldn't be like pushed out of seriously.
She's getting to. Right. I mean,
What I like about Jane is this particular have a really strong
to plug everything in time, and so whatever they can do to help you out, they're willing to do. So I can't wait since the 6th, and I was on vacation. Days for those days, like they're really
Yeah.
see, that's the one thing that one of them now is because I'm a salary guy.
Right. You were on. Yeah, I don't know. It's with the new like overtime rules, so people don't have Right.
Like it's very rare. And they probably they're very you should absolutely. Because I can see Jane Dean, she is in the spot with him now, and she finds out that you just resigned and that you were here, you know, I was just
Right, and just be open with it.
Yeah,
Because then
maybe
you should
know
be
my
able
whole
to,
like
yeah, just be like, I'm like, so-and-so only has about a year left.
Right.
Thank you. They just took some. I thought there was an interim step where. They walked to the.
Is that who took the most?
I wasn't sure. I'm not sure exactly. I'm not sure exactly how that works. Because Google was MSJ in there.
Right.
So I don't know. I would assume that the personal problem.
Jake is sickly here.
Because I know they want to have that.
Yeah.
Even if you're not trying to do it.
And I had some version. Some can't. Works great.
Yeah, as long
No, I mean, and I like brought up with that. My package are on my way back. It's not as bad as well.
right.
Yes, or like, what's nice about here is I'm gonna get a anyway, so it's like there's something else.
Yeah.
And everyone's here. We were able to be when I was a kid or like trading things for protection, like they're all home. So I need to be that.
Good for you. If there's anything I can do.
I will.
Cool.
Good to see you.
Were you working
A rough one like that is real rough.
That is.
Every 5 words. They can use this.
So I'll be here just a second.
Well, I don't know if there's any questions for all.
Okay. Just sitting would be better. You listen to it. Yep. Okay.
We'll do this in a minute. We'll let Don Melissa get back in the room.
The quorum doesn't even actually say quorum.
That'd be great. That'd be great.
All right.
Y'all ready? Question.
What happens if there's an appeal of the recount results filed in circuit court after the recount is complete and that circuit court decision is not made by the December 13th deadline?
It's a good question. I'll let Mr. Haas go first, and then I'll give you my thoughts.
I think from the perspective of the Elections Commission, our job is to make sure that the recount gets completed and completed by December 13th. If there's any court action after that, then it's really going to be in the hands of the court and the parties. The Elections Commission would be represented by the Department of Justice, but there isn't, I don't believe, any clear answer as far as how that interacts with the federal deadlines. As some of you may recall, in the 2000 Bush v. Gore decision, the U.S. Supreme Court made its decision on that 35th day, and that's what prevented that federal deadline from coming into play.
This is, as the chair and as a member of the Democratic Party on the commission, we cut the timeline down as tight as we could to get the recount completed within the safe harbor provisions. I fully expect, given the history of how elections are conducted in Wisconsin and their accuracy and my trust in my citizens who are counting these votes, that the outcome is not going to be different. I certainly assume that the margin won't, it may be not 22,177, but I don't doubt that the president-elect is going to win that vote. I think that should be sufficient for any decision in Congress as to how those electoral votes should be cast. We can't stop, this issue of final determination. It would be, we really thought, or I personally really thought that to try to count it tighter would be a much, much, much bigger problem than having it done in such a way. The other thing is, it's the 35 days, but there's also, isn't there an additional 6 days built in?
December 19th is the meeting of the presidential
Right, so, that still would allow, I mean, it's tight, but then it would be a judicial determination. But we did everything we could.
And this is certainly not Bush v. Gore. I mean, the likelihood of a court appeal of this recount decision is certainly a lot different than the context in that case.
Michael or Mark, can you, in simple terms, break down what it is exactly you're asking people to do, the clerks to do here? Is it, and I don't want to oversimplify it, simply taking the ballot and putting it back in the machine to see if you got the same number?
That's for Mike.
In the end, it's a matter of looking at the ballot and the tabulators agreeing on either a hand count. In a hand count, the tabulators agreeing what the vote is, or examining the ballot and putting it back into the voting equipment. But before that happens, there's a series of steps that they have to take to reconcile other election materials, to look at the poll list, reconcile poll lists, look at absentee ballot materials. So the actual working with the ballots is not the end of the story. There's a lot of other technical steps, procedural steps that they need to take to ensure that the number of voters that are marked on the poll list as voting matches the number of ballots that are being counted, a number of checks like that.
Where in this state, what counties specifically are you hearing that are going to have the most difficult time getting this done by December 12th?
Well, many of the county clerks were not around when we sent the two emails, and so we haven't really had a chance to hear much feedback from them except for the clerks that immediately responded to our request for estimates. So in general, I think we would expect the most populous counties. They have the most ballots to count, the most voters, obviously. They need to recruit the most number of bodies to be available. And we can give you an example of the recount in the 32nd Senate District. There's 4 counties involved. La Crosse is the most populous county. They estimated that they will finish counting their ballots in 5 to 6 days. They will now have to have a second recount to process those ballots again and count the presidential election. In theory, it shouldn't take any longer than it did for the Senate District recount, although you may have more observers and more objections to deal with. But other smaller counties, Crawford and Monroe counties, told us they expected more like 2 to 3 to 4 days. So many, as I said, many of our counties we expect to be finished in a week or a little over a week. But if you talk about Dane County, Milwaukee County, Greene County, Waukesha County, some of our more populous counties, it is going to be a challenge.
The people who have requested this recount have expressed concern about the possibility that machines were hacked. Have you seen anything to justify that concern?
No.
Jill Stein actually said on Friday on CNN she had questions about certain voting machines in certain counties in Wisconsin. She didn't say specifically. Do you know what she's talking about? She said, quote, some of the voting machines in use in Wisconsin, for example, have actually been prohibited in the state of California because they've basically been proven to be wide open tampering, she said on CNN.
We're not aware of what equipment she might be referring to as far as equipment that has been prohibited for use in California. The process in Wisconsin is that the equipment is tested at the federal level and certified at the federal level for technical standards, how the equipment works, security standards. Then if a manufacturer wants to sell equipment to municipal clerks in Wisconsin, our agency tests the equipment again to make sure it complies with our statutes and how votes are tabulated. And then it is approved by the commission or by the Government Accountability Board previously. And then before each election, the voting equipment needs to be tested by the municipal clerk within 10 days of the election. That's a public test. Anybody is welcome to come and see. that the ballots that are run through the equipment are being tabulated correctly. Then the equipment is secured, the programming is secured until election day. Election inspectors at the beginning of the day need to go through a protocol to make sure that the software is showing 0 votes at the beginning of the day. They need to make sure it's secured throughout the day. So we've said many times that there are a number of reasons why we are skeptical of any claims that voting equipment is either not working correctly or being tampered with in the state of Wisconsin. Among those reasons are it is not connected to the internet. We have a number of different systems in place in the state. We have a very decentralized system, and an individual would need to have unfettered physical access to voting equipment and to be able to enter the locked cabinet where the software, the memory device is located. And to do that once and be detected is hard to believe it could happen. To do that throughout the state with a variety of different equipment it seems very unlikely.
So just elaborate on that a little bit, Mike. I think there's been an assumption that someone through the internet or through some other electronic connections could access voting machines and reprogram or repurpose them. Again, we have about 1,800 municipalities in the state, correct? Are you saying that over a significant number of those municipalities, people would have to physically access the voting machines and reprogram them?
Right, because if it's not connected to the internet, in theory, you cannot tamper it with it over the internet. I'll let Ross chime in if he has anything else to add.
I really don't. I mean, it's as simple as in order to access the equipment, you would actually have to get your hands on it. And our security protocols ensure that at the municipal level that all that equipment is under lock and key with authorization limited to only personnel within that office. And there's processes where tamper evidence seals are put on the equipment immediately after the public test. That's verified before the polls open and again after the polls close. And in Wisconsin, for any of the touchscreen voting systems that are used, state law requires that we have what's called a voter verified paper audit trail, and that's the official ballot, and that's what will be used for the recount throughout the state.
And we might as well, I guess, address the claim or the theories that equipment has programming in it that is automatically triggered on election day. Again, the people who program the equipment are either the county clerks or the equipment vendors who are authorized to program the equipment. So you need to believe that those individuals are either intentionally or unintentionally installing some malware that is going to be triggered on election day and not be detected through any other process that we've described.
Just to elaborate on one last thing. In many cases, these machines are quite old, correct? I mean, which is another issue entirely. But, I mean, in certain cases, the vendor would have sold it to us many years ago, right?
Correct, yes.
Many of these systems were required as part of the 2002 Help America Vote Act. And so in many of the rural locations, these touchscreen systems were purchased to provide accessibility to individuals with disabilities. And these are jurisdictions that have historically always hand-counted paper ballots, and many of these same locations, even though they now have touchscreen voting systems, will still have had voters vote using paper ballots. And so with the recount, will tabulate both ballots that were counted by hand and then also ballots that were tabulated by the electronic voting equipment.
So someone would have to tamper with each machine. There would be no way to access multiple voting machines to tamper or alter the vote count.
None that we are aware of.
Let me just say this on this issue. I think we're going to look back when this recount is completed and find that the system worked well, and I don't expect that the outcome will be qualitatively different than the recount at the Supreme Court, where we had a minimal amount of votes done. And that will tell us what the staff is telling the commission, is that it is a decentralized and relatively safe system, and was confirmed before with, there were meetings with Homeland Security prior to that there hadn't been any attacks on Wisconsin machines. So I think the recount is going to tell us that. From my point as the chair of the commission, I think it's most unfortunate that the president-elect is claiming that there's huge problems with our system, and that's feeding what I call this conspiracy theory. I mean, it's just, you know, I'd like him to come down out of his Trump Tower and go up to Watoma and Washira County and spend the time with the folks on the ground that are counting these votes. I mean, he won that county. But I mean, to say that it's not being fair or it's not, that people are counting illegal votes, from my vantage point, is an insult to the people that run our elections. We have 1,854 municipal clerks and 72 county clerks that deserve better treatment. Any other questions?
For people who show up at these counties to watch, observe, what are the guidelines, rules for their, and what say will they have in, like, hey, you can't count that ballot, or you better count that ballot?
Well, first of all, we do invite the public to go to wherever their county canvass, recount canvass is being held and observe. There's a difference between public observers and observers who are designated by the campaigns. Each candidate can designate at each recount location a primary representative who is the sole person who can raise objections about ballots. They can designate secondary representatives who can ask the tabulators to set aside ballots for further review or possibly to object to those ballots. But so in this case we have 7 candidates. There may be 7 different representatives asking to look at a ballot and decide whether or not they want to raise an objection.
And you had DOJ on the phone. What role do they play in each of these retabulation or the recount? Are they physically on the ground? Are the DA's office physically on the ground?
No, during the election, certainly district attorneys, law enforcement, and DOJ was on site at various polling places just to observe, but they have no formal really or informal role in the recount process. They're welcome to come like any other member of the public as observers, but we would not expect them to be participating unless there's some type of crowd control or disturbance at a location.
Can you address the specifics?
The chairman had a harsh criticism of President-elect Trump, which may or may not be warranted. Would you have the same? What would your feelings be about the candidates who are calling for the recount? I mean, after all, the president-elect is not the one putting Wisconsin through this.
My comments are the same. I think ultimately, at the end of the day, the count is going to be the same. And the reason I make the distinction is because I'm assuming that the president-elect is going to be the president. And what the president says about our system is very, very important. Much more important to me than, no disrespect to Ms. Stein, but she got 31,006 votes. I mean, someone has the bully pulpit and somebody has impact on our citizens' right to trust what happens, down the block at their polling places. And, I've never seen this kind of attack on poll workers and how this system works. And I think it's just, we're going to play it out, and I'm confident that the president-elect is going to win. And we're doing everything we can to make sure that it's timely and it doesn't impact the Electoral College.
Could you address the specifics of how the recount will take place for the votes that were cast on these electronic voting machines? Because that seems to be where some of these issues have been targeted. And can you just talk about that? It sounds like it's going to involve examining a paper trail.
Exactly. When we talk about the electronic equipment, we're really talking about the touchscreen equipment, to put it in more common parlance. So that equipment has 2 spools, sort of cash register receipt type spools, that record the ballot that is cast. The voter can verify before the vote is tabulated that the screen has recorded the votes accurately, and the voter can leave with that receipt. The other spool that records the exact same votes is then used for the recount. Did I describe that accurately, Ross? You did. And so in that case, those votes will be hand counted. They can't go back into the touchscreen machine and look at the results. They will be looking at that spool of the paper trail and counting the votes that way.
Can you detail again what the 8 p.m. deadline is on December 12th versus when the commission member will sign the recount on 3 p.m. the next day?
Right, we're required to give 24 hours notice for our certification of the official results. That's what we will be doing tomorrow for all of the other elections. And so the commission decided today that the deadline for the counties to complete their work will be 8 p.m. on December 12th. And then we will put out a notice by December 12th as to the exact time for our chair or the chair's designee to actually sign the certification.
So at this point, the only real former role that any candidate, not Jill Stein or De La Fuente, will have in this recount will be in the representatives at the different sites.
Exactly. When Secretary Clinton's campaign says that they want to participate in the recount, that is the same as any other candidate's right to participate in the recount. They have a right to have representatives at the recount, and if there is any litigation that results, I assume the court would allow those candidates also to intervene. And so, to make clear, because we've received questions over the weekend, Secretary Clinton's representatives participating in the recount does not mean that those representatives are counting the ballots. To make that clear, they can be there as observers. They have no more right to count the ballots as a representative of the Stein or Trump campaign who might want to volunteer their services to be hired as one of the tabulators.
Nor that means that they will be paying for the recount.
Exactly. They're not required to pay for the recount.
Let's just take a couple more questions. The staff has to get back and let the campaigns know what they have to pay by tomorrow, and we're trying to get that done by noon per our earlier meeting. So I'll take a couple more questions and then we'll wrap it up and let the staff go back to work.
But to clarify, looking at each ballot, can Clinton, Stein, Trump, anybody else say that ballot shouldn't be counted, that should be counted, and how will you determine who's a representative of those campaigns at each county site?
So those representatives are required to let the canvass board know, I'm the primary representative, this is our secondary representative, and yes, any of the campaigns can object to a vote, and then it's up to the canvass board to make a decision how that ballot is to be interpreted.
And I mean, this happens in every recount, so I mean, people know how to handle those issues. One more question?
Mike, if you could go over what scenario would trigger, I know you mentioned judicial, what would trigger a hand recount?
As far as a court order? The standard in the statutes has three parts. One is that there is reason to believe that the voting equipment tabulated ballots inaccurately or may have. Secondly, that a hand count would be more accurate than a voting equipment tally. And third, that there's a likelihood that the result would change by using a hand count. And so that's the reason why I express that seems to be a high burden of proof for any candidate in this case.
Thank you all.
Thank you.
Thanks, Ben.
Yeah.
That's good enough.
Thanks for
You mean that was fun. Yeah, this is not. This is his office.
Right, yeah.
It was great fun.
Yeah, you as well. Good luck.
Everything. I so enjoy watching your journey.
Oh, thank you. And like I said, let me know if I can do. I know you know Jane and them personally anyway. But
Well, thank you for the advice. I appreciate it.
Yeah, of course.
I gotta call like see if they're gonna
So, we don't have any equipment here. Dane County, I saw the Dane County clerk in the back. I don't know if he's still here. Did we bring a lot here by chance?
I did, but maybe you want to just head back and
put something together for
The branding superstars, right? Did you guys ever figure out what I do? If you just
and then
They want me at 4 too. 4 as well. TOO. Oh, I don't know. Yeah, everything. I haven't. Are you on it?
Does that mean that we're interested in anything about it's goofy. If it repeats around the rest of the state.
Okay, so they're recommending.
Missed